In less than a week, Donald Trump will be back in the White House as US president. It's a change of power that's expected to have far-reaching consequences for the United States and also for the rest of the world. Leaders of America's neighbours here in Europe and in capitals around the globe are waiting to see what the new US president will do once he returns to the Oval Office. During Trump's first term in office, he snubbed some of America's traditional European allies and pursued closer ties with autocrats like the North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. Trump also famously said he wanted a better relationship with Russia. Now, Vladimir Putin's Russia is at war with its democratic neighbour Ukraine, and both sides are pinning their hopes for the future on the new US administration.
Donald Trump's second presidency will take place on a very different world stage to his last time in office, with a lineup of very different global challenges. But he's already made some ambitious promises.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, shortly after I win the presidency, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled, and it would have never happened. It would have never, ever happened if I was there.
Trump has yet to say how he plans to end the conflict. Regardless, his presidency could have a major impact on Ukraine. He has threatened to cut US funding for Kyiv and re-evaluate America's role in NATO.
The US is currently paying much more than any other nation, and that is not fair to the United States or the United States taxpayer.
The US is also a big backer of Israel's military amid its conflicts in the Middle East. Trump is expected to continue that support, but says he will end the fighting.
And I will stop the chaos in the Middle East. There's another thing, Israel, October 7th. October 7th would have never happened.
Trump's grandiose approach and tendency to act impulsively marks a significant shift from Joe Biden's presidency. And his America First approach signals a major change in Washington's international agenda. Trump has said tariff is his favourite word and plans to raise taxes on imported goods, particularly from China, potentially reshaping global trade. Trump also wants to reshape international borders. He's made repeated claims about expanding US territory to include Canada and Greenland, as well as the Panama Canal. Most of Trump's plans for his second White House stint have come with very few details or explanations, creating much anticipation and apprehension about how the next 4 years will unfold.
And for more on what President Trump's foreign policy might look like in his second term, I'm joined now by analyst Ian Bremmer, the president of the Eurasia Group think tank. Welcome back to DW. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme. Donald Trump has made it known that he wants the war in Ukraine to be over. Both Ukraine and Russia are, of course, hoping that pressure from the new US president will benefit their side. So in your opinion, who is more likely to be disappointed?
I suspect that the Russians are more likely to be disappointed. And the reason for that is because their expectations of Trump have been more unrealistic. There's been a lot more communication between the Ukrainians and the Americans, both directly and indirectly via NATO allies over the last couple months. So they have a pretty good sense of where Trump is, the demands that will be made of them, but also the fact that Trump doesn't want Ukraine to lose. He's going to be dealing with this for 4 years of his presidency. Putin, I think, has very unrealistic expectations of what he is capable of getting from a transactional Trump that's been saying, I want the end of this war, and is not expecting necessarily that Trump is going to push Putin very hard, including threatening him with additional sanctions. I think he'll be disappointed, and it's going to make it a more challenging process to get to yes than perhaps Trump had initially anticipated.
Mm-hmm. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky was in neighbouring Poland today, and that country's Prime Minister Donald Tusk accused Russia of plotting acts of sabotage around the globe. We're going to take a quick listen to what Tusk said, and we'll come right back to you.
I can't go into detail, but I can confirm that there are real fears that Russia is planning acts of air terrorism not only against Poland, but against airlines around the world.
Now, Ian, Donald Trump has never been particularly critical of Russia or of Vladimir Putin, has he? So do you think Trump will heed these warnings about Russia?
Look, I mean, they're not new warnings. He didn't mention civilian aircraft, and we've already known about Russian plots against cargo planes, and that's indeed an act of terrorism. We also know that the Russians were behind an effort to assassinate the CEO of the largest German defense company. So, I mean, there is a proxy war going on. The Russians are fighting directly against NATO and not just frontline countries, and this is a real danger for NATO collectively. Now, you're right that Trump has been reluctant to criticize Putin directly, and certainly much more reluctant than he has many of his own allies. But Trump's actual policies towards Putin in his first administration were somewhat harder line than Obama's. Trump added sanctions against Russia. That was his administration. He could have stopped it. He chose not to. He also approved sending Javelin anti-tank missiles to the Ukrainians against Russia when Obama had said that that was too dangerous. It was too escalatory. Trump could have stopped that if he had chosen to. So as much as I recognize that Trump likes to be the deal maker that will engage with anyone, he'll engage with Kim Jong Un directly. He's the one that invited Xi Jinping to come to his inauguration. No other president's ever done that. But that doesn't mean the policies are going to be easy. And just as I fully expect that the Trump administration is going to put quite tough tariffs on China, significantly higher than we saw under the Biden administration, with knock-on implications for everyone, I also expect that if he doesn't get what he wants from the Russians, he'll be prepared to act considerably tougher as the president of the most powerful country on the planet.
You mentioned NATO earlier, Ian. Many NATO countries here in Europe are worried about Trump's threat to force allies to pay 5% of GDP towards defence. Tell us how you see Trump's stance on NATO. I mean, do you think he's committed to NATO's future without any strings attached?
I don't think he's committed to anything without strings attached. There's always strings attached, but you can get to yes. And we saw that in his first term. He originally said NATO was obsolete when he was running for the presidency, and then said, well, actually, now that I talked to my generals, I didn't know anything about that. I'm a real estate guy. I don't know national security. So actually, it's not obsolete. He did push NATO members to pay more than they had been paying under Obama. Maybe he didn't get as much done as Putin did by invading Ukraine, but still, that was progress from America's perspective. And I think from the perspective of the collective security of NATO as an alliance, and he takes credit for that. He's quite comfortable with where that ended up. He's doing that again. He has a quite good working relationship with Mark Rutte back when Mark was the prime minister of the Netherlands. And you know that the now Secretary General of NATO has been pushing to talk about a 3% goal of defense spend, which would bring the Europeans roughly to the same level as the United States. And that's where I think Trump would like the conversation to be, but he isn't going to start that way, just as he's not starting with a normal conversation with Denmark and Greenland. Instead, he's saying that the United States should buy it. Not credible, not plausible. I kind of wish he would not employ such incredibly exaggerated rhetoric all the time. I'd rather he didn't say that he was going to end the war with Ukraine in the first day. And he said it repeatedly, time and time again. We already know he's not even president yet. We already know that he's saying, well, it's going to take a few months. That's not one day, right? I mean, he didn't mean a day, like an hour every week over the course of a period of time. He said 24 hours. It would make him more credible if he didn't do that. But you don't have to be as credible when you exert power running the United States. Your credibility is the force in the hand behind your glove.
All right, we will have to leave it there. Ian Bremmer, the president of the Eurasia Group, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your time.
Always good to be with you, sure. Yep.